Chapter 3. Brahmanism. For a brief study of Brahmanism, the religion practiced in India, we can hardly do better than quote from the work of such recognized authorities as Messrs. Stilson and Hewen. In attempting to trace the origin of Brahmanism, they make the following observations. After being conquered by the Kuthites under Rama, the son of Cush, referred to in Genesis 2:7 and another chapter which isn't named, the mysteries of the deluge were introduced. The worship soon became divided into two sects. We were not fully apprised when was first introduced the Brahminic system, composed of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, constituting the Trimurti, one branch of which was mild and benevolent, and addressed to Vishnu, the preserver, while the other proclaimed the superiority of Shiva, who was called the destroyer and the representative of terror and penance, barbarity and blood, in Egypt represented by Typhon. These mysteries, whatever may have been their origin, or for what purposes they were then instituted, were certainly corruption of the original worship of the one deity. They bore a direct reference to the happiness of man in paradise, where he was first placed, his subsequent deviations and transgressions, and the destruction of the race by the general deluge. The great cavern of Elephanta, perhaps the most ancient temple in the world made by man, in which these rites were performed and remaining to the present day, is an evidence of the magnitude of the system. The caverns of Salseti, of which there are 300, all have within carved emblematic characters. The different ranges of apartments are connected by open galleries, and only by private entrances could the most secret caverns, which contained the ineffable symbols, be approached, and so curiously contrived as to give the highest effect upon the neophytes when in the ceremonial of initiation. A cubical cisia, used for the periodical sepulture of the aspirant, was located in the most secret recesses of the cavern. The consecrated water of absolution was held in a carved basin in every cavern, and on the surface floated the flowers of the lotus. The linga or phallus appeared everywhere, most conspicuous, and oftentimes in situations too disgusting to be mentioned. Sacrifices to the sun, to the planets, and to household gods were made, accompanied with ablutions of water, purifications with dung and urine of the cow. This last was because the dung was the medium by which the soil was made fertile, and reminded them of the doctrine of corruption and reproduction taught in the worship of Shiva. An initiation is thus described. Amidst all the confusion, a sudden explosion was heard, which was followed by a dead silence. Flashes of brilliant light were succeeded by darkness, phantoms and shadows of various forms surrounded by rays of light fitted across the gloom, some with many hands, arms, and legs, others without them, sometimes a shapeless trunk, then a human body with the head of a bird, a beast, or a fish. All manner of incongruous forms and bodies were seen, and all calculated to excite terror in the mind of the postulant. A gorgeous appearance with unnumbered heads, each having a crown set with replenished jewels, one of which excelled the others. His eyes gleamed like flaming torches, but his neck, his tongues, and his body were black. The skirts of his garments were yellow, and sparkling jewels hung in all of his ears. His arms were extended and adorned with bracelets, and his hands bore the holy shell, the radiated weapon, the war mace, and the sacred lotus. This image represented Mahadeva himself in his character of the destroyer. Among other learned authorities writing on these subjects is Jacolio, who gives the following description of perverted Brahmanism. The study of philosophic truth does not relieve the nirvanis and the yogis from necessity of the tapasas, or bodily mortifications. On the contrary, it would seem that they carry them to the greatest extremes. Everything that affects or consumes the body, everything that tends to its annihilation without actually destroying it, is thought to be meritorious. Several centuries previous to the present era, however, these bodily mortifications had assumed a character of unusual severity. To the contemplative dreamers of the earliest ages in India, who devoted the whole of their time to meditation and never engaged in practices involving physical suffering, oftener than once a week, had succeeded a class of bigoted fanatics who placed no limit to their religious enthusiasm and inflicted upon themselves the most terrible tortures. A spiritual reaction, however, occurred, and those who had been initiated into the higher degrees took that opportunity to abandon the practice of the tapasas, or corporal mortification. They sought rather to impress the imagination of the people by excessive asceticism in opposition to the laws of nature. A profound humility, an ardent desire to live unknown by the world and to have a divinity as the only witness to the purity of their morals, took possession of them, and though they continued the practice of excessive abstemiousness, what a difficult word, abstaining from things, practically. They did so perhaps more that they might not seem to be in conflict with the formal teaching of the sacred scriptures. That kind of austerity is the only one now enjoyed upon all classes of initiates. The fakirs appear to have gradually monopolized all the old modes of inflicting pain, and have carried them to the greatest extremes. They display the most unbounded fanaticism in their self-inflicted tortures upon all great public festivals. The Nirvanis live in a constant state of ecstatic contemplation, depriving themselves of sleep as far as possible and taking food only once a week after sunset. They are never visible either in the grounds or inside the temples, except on the occasion of the grand festival of fire, which occurs every 5 years. On that day, they appear at midnight upon a stand erected in the center of the sacred tank. They appear like... No, this is not the best reader I have here. They appear like specters, and the surrounding atmosphere is illuminated by them by means of their incantations. They seem to be in the midst of a column of light rising from earth to heaven. The 7 degrees of initiation in the sacerdotal caste of Brahmins are... Oh, okay, excuse me, my pronunciation of these things. Grihasta, or housemaster. Ohita, the priest of popular evocations. The fakir, performing. Sannyasis, or naked cenobites, superior exorcists. Nirvanis, naked evocators. Yogis, contemplative. Brahmatma, supreme chief. Upon reaching the 3rd degree of initiation, the Brahmins were divided into 10s, and a superior guru, or professor of the occult science, was placed over each decade. He was revered by his principles as a god. 70 Brahmins, more than 70 years old, are chosen from among the Nirvanis to see that the law of the lotus, or the occult science, is never revealed to the vulgar, and that those who have been initiated into the sacred order are not contaminated by the admission of an unworthy person, quoted from the Agrushada Parikshai. In addition to its attributes as an initiatory tribunal, the Council of the Elders also had charge of administering the pagoda property, from which it made provision for the wants of its members, of the 3 classes, who shared everything in common. It is also directed the wanderings of the fakirs, whose duty it is to give manifestations of occult power outside. It is also elected the Brahmatma from its own members. With regard to the rise to power of the Brahmin caste in India, Mr. Jacoliot writes in Le Fil de Dieu, doubtless in the midst of this new society, discontent and discord were unavoidable. Happy in the power they had secured, the chiefs of the Brahmins, however, had to consider means for preserving and ensuring it against a reversal of popular favor. At this distance, it is impossible for us to judge the mental influences at work during a period covering about 2,000 years. That is to say, from the day when the priests united into a kind of corporation to the time when, enjoying unchallenged authority, they published the Vedas. the Vedas. Excuse me. This was a collection of prayers and ancient ceremonies interspersed with the texts necessary to maintaining their supremacy under the name Manu, Sanskrit meaning wise lawgiver. A new code of law which, rejecting all the ancient customs of equality and dividing the people into castes, invested the Brahmins with world power and established the dogma of the Trimurti, or Trinity of God, from which eventually was to spring polytheism and a host of the most monstrous superstitions. This religious revolution occurred about 12,000 years before our era, under the Brahmatma Vasishta Rishi. I'm butchering these words, I know it. The Vedas and Manu, collected and codified by the Brahmins, were given as coming from Brahma himself, and anyone doubting the truth of this origin was liable to the penalty of death. That seems to be the way things always go, right? I'm sorry. I gotta take a break. Hold on. As among the ancient Egyptians, the teaching of monotheism was restricted to the highest initiates alone. Jacolio emphasizes this was when he writes, "The worship of the one God, or Zeus unrevealed, reserved to the priests, was forbidden to the lower classes, but 3 temples dedicated to the 3 persons of the Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, opened their doors to the adoration of the people, all of whom were allowed to select one of the 3 personages of the Trinity they would prefer to worship." I've got a terrible reader, by the way. I told you that before. This division in religious worship, which eventually led to the caste system, shows the power of theocratic tyranny. The Brahmins, seeking to justify the method whereby the control of the masses is vested in the hands of a few, when preaching in the pagodas, even now say, "See how logical this system of division of the people into castes? It was formed in the likeness of the divinity, Zeus, sovereign master of all things, but taking no action himself. This is the Brahmin priest Brahma, the god who creates, who acts, who directs, that is the aristocrat of the prince, or the prince. Vishnu, the god who preserves, that is the artisan, the merchant, who produces taxes, preserving and assuring the prosperity of the state by his work and industry. As for Shiva, the terrible god, he keeps the Sudra, the peasant, in a state of humility and obedience, appropriate to his station in life." Another very important function appears, however, to have been early assigned to him, on which much stress is laid in his Shiva modern worship, the destroyer. Vis, the character of a generative power, symbolized in the phallic emblem, linga, and in the sacred bull, nandi. The favorite attendant of God, this feature being entirely alien from the nature of the Vedic god, it has been conjectured with some plausibility that the linga worship was originally prevalent among the non-Aryan population and was thence introduced into the worship of Shiva. One of the most curious facts in the theocratic system ruling India is that the principle of equality is evidenced only in the teaching and practice of occultism. Members of all castes are admitted on the same footing to learn magic or fakirism and compose the class known under the name of fakirs. The system of equality is similar to the brotherhood principle and teaching of democracy advocated in Freemasonry, which was so effectively exploited in all the lodges that fomented the French Revolution. As all castes are admitted to the congregation of the fakirs, the lowest of the Sudras on entering it becomes the equal of the Brahmins, in spreading the belief that whoever consented to enroll among the high initiates of the pagoda and to die for the faith was transported to the abode of Brahma without accomplishing further migration on earth or having to pass through hell. The Brahmins provided for an inexhaustible supply of fakirs. I'm going to turn off the cooler for a second Before entering the category of fakir, those who are destined to illustrate the ceremonies of the cults by their tortures and death, the new recruits practice the occult sciences under the direction of initiated Brahmins in the innermost recesses of the pagodas. While there are indeed extraordinary phenomena in what is termed by the Brahmins occult science, there are none which cannot be explained which are not in accordance with the law of nature. To become an expert in magic, like the believers in the philosophic doctrine of the Pitras, the pupil must learn from a magician whom the sorcerers call their guru, the formulas of evocation by means of which the malign spirits are brought into complete subjection. Some of these spirits the magician evokes in preference to others, probably on account of their willingness to do anything they may be required of them. An intimate connection exists between the doctrine of the ancient Jewish Kabbalists and those of the Hindu votaries of the Pitras, or spirits, whose scientific book is the Agrushada Parakshay. It would be impossible to enumerate the different drugs, ingredients, and implements that compose the stock and trade of a magician. The standard Indian book on magic is the Upnikat. Therein is to be found a detailed description of methods available for producing catalepsy, somnambulism, hallucinations, ecstasy by strength of will, and fatigue of the nervous system. This is what is known to the modern common sense mortal as yogi stuff, and it is mostly based on breathing exercises. We will now quote from Mr. Ceylon. It is a little remarkable that of the host of divinities, especially in Bengal, Shiva is the god whom they are especially delighted to honor. As the destroyer and one who reveals in cruelty and bloodshed, this terrible deity who has not inaptly been compared to the Malach of the scripture, of all their divinities suggests most our idea of the devil. It may therefore be concluded that the most exalted notion of worship among Hindus is the service of fear. The Brahmins say that the other gods are good and benevolent, and will not hurt their creatures, but that Shiva is powerful and cruel, that is necessary to appease him. 1 second. 1 second. Oh gosh, I need a drink. Although this deity is sometimes represented in the human form in his images, it is not thus that he is most frequently adored. The most popular representation of him is unquestionably the linga, a smooth stone rising out of another stone of finer texture. Simulacrum membri virilis et pudendum mulibre. This emblem is identical with Shiva in his capacity of Lord of all. It is necessary, however, to observe here that Professor Wilson, while admitting that the linga is perhaps the most ancient object of homage adopted in India, adds, subsequently to the ritual of the Vedas, which was chiefly, if not wholly, addressed to the elements, and particularly to fire. How far the worship of the linga is authorized by the Vedas is doubtful, but that it is the main purport of several of the Puranas, there can be no doubt. The worship of Shiva under the type of linga is almost the only form in which that deity is reverenced. Its prevalence throughout the whole tract of the Ganges, as far as Benares, is sufficiently conspicuous. In Bengal, the lingam temples are commonly erected in a range of 6, 8, or 12 on each side of the ghat leading to the river. At Kalma, it is a circular group of 108 temples erected by the Raja of Burdwan. These temples, and indeed all those found in Bengal, consist of a simple chamber of a square form surmounted by a pyramidal center, the area of which is very small. The linga of black or white marble, and sometimes of alabaster, slightly tinted and gilt, is placed in the middle. Benares is a peculiar seat from this form of worship. The principal deity, Shiva, there called Vivaswara, is a linga, and most of the chief objects of pilgrimage are similar blocks of stone. No less than 47 lingas are visited, all of the preeminent sanctity. But there are hundreds of inferior notes still worshipped, and thousands whose fame and fashion have passed away. It is a singular fact that upon this adoration of the procreative and sexual Sakti, or power, seen throughout nature, hinges the whole gist of the Hindu faith. Bacchus, or Osiris, was represented by an equilateral triangle, and the sectarian mark of the worshippers of Shiva is this hieroglyphic. The worship of Bacchus was the same as that which is paid to Shiva. It had the same obscenities, the same cruel bloodthirsty rites, and the same emblem of the generative power. Durga, Kali, or Mahakali, as the Sakti, spouse or energetic will of Shiva, the destructive power, bears a remarkable analogy with the Malach of the scripture, as well as the Typhon, Saturn, Dis, Pluto, and the other divinities of the West. When the attributes of the Supreme Being began to be viewed in the light of distinct individuals, mankind attached themselves to the worship of one or the other exclusively, and arranged themselves into sects. No, I don't know why I can't say it right. The worshippers of Shiva introduced the doctrine of the eternity of matter. In order to reconcile the apparent contradiction of assigning the attribute of creation to the principle of destruction, they asserted that the dissolution and destruction of bodies was not real with respect to matter, which was in itself indestructible, although its modifications were in a constant succession of mutation, that the power must necessarily unite in itself the attributes of creation and apparent destruction, that this power and matter are two distinct and coexistent principles in nature, the one active, the other passive, the one male, the other female, and that creation was the effect of the mysterious union of the two. This union is worshipped under a variety of names: Bhava, Bhavani, Mahadeva, Mahamaya, etc. Thus the attribute of creation was usurped from Brahma by the followers of Shiva to adorn and characterize their favorite divinity. This seems to have been a popular worship for a great length of time, out of which sprang two sects. The one personified the whole universe and dispensations of providence in the regulation of it, under the name of Prakriti, and which we from the Latin call nature. This sect retains the Sakti only, and were the originators of the Sakta sects, or worshippers of power. The other sect took for their symbol the male emblem Linga, unconnected with the female Sakti or Yoni. There was a third sect who adorned both male and female. According to Theodoret, Arnobius, and Clemens of Alexandria, the Yoni of the Hindus was the sole object of veneration of the mysteries of Eleusis. It is not only the votaries of Shiva who adore their god under the symbolic form of the linga. The Vaishnavas, or followers of Vishnu, use the same medium. One second, I gotta... They are Lingayats, one of the essential characteristics of which is wearing the type on some part of their dress or person. The Vaishnavas are divided into many sects. They comprise of Gokulatas and Yonijas and Ramani and Radhabalutis. The Gokulatas adore Krishna, while the Ramani worship Rama. Both have again branched into three sects. One consists of the exclusive worshippers of Krishna, and these only are deemed true and orthodox Vaishnavas. As Paramesvara, Krishna is represented of a black or dark blue color. Now the Tulasi is the black osamum, and the animals and vegetables of a black or blue color are sacred to him. His linga is also always either black or dark blue, and may thus be distinguished from that of Shiva, which is generally white. This divinity, as Paramaswara and Juggernaut, or Lord of the Universe, and it is under the wheels of his sacred car that so many misguided beings annually immolated themselves. To return, however, to the Vaishnavas, another of their sects adore Krishna and his mistress Radha united. They are the Lingyonjas, whose worship is perhaps the most free of all the pujas. A third, the Radha Balubis, dedicated their offerings to Radha only. The followers of these last mentioned sects have adopted the singular practice of presenting to a naked girl the oblation intended for the goddess, constituting her the living impersonation of Radha. When a female is not to be obtained for this purpose, the votive offerings are made to an image of the yoni, or emblem of the feminine power. These worshippers are called yonijas, in contradistinction to the Lingyats, or adorers of Krishna, Vishnu, Linga. As the Sevas are all worshippers of Shiva and Bhavani, Parvati, conjointly so the Vaishnavas also offer up their prayers to Lakshmi Nayarana. The exclusive adorers of this goddess are the Saktas. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for butchering these words. I have to take one short break and mention that we are going to probably get into some chapters where I can actually pronounce the words. I hope. Okay. Moving on. The caste mark of the Shivas, of the Saivas and Saktas, consists of 3 horizontal lines on the forehead with ashes obtained, if possible, from the hearth on which a consecrated fire is perpetually maintained. The adoration of the Sakti is quite in accordance with the spirit of the mythological system of the Hindus. It has been computed that of the Hindus in Bengal, at least 3/4 are Saktis. Of the remaining fourth, 3 parts are Vaishnavas and 1 Shaivas. Independently of the homage paid to the principal deities, there are a great variety of inferior beings, dutas and demigods of the malevolent character and formidable aspect, who receive the worship of the multitude. The bride of Shiva, however, in one or other of her many varied forms, is by far the most popular goddess in Bengal and along the Ganges. The worship of the female generative principle, as distinct from divinity, appears to have originated in the literal interpretation of the metaphorical language of the Vedas, in which will or purpose to create the universe is represented as originating from the Creator and coexistent with him as his bride and part of himself. Excuse me. Although the adoration of the Sakti, the personified energy of the omnipotent, is authorized by some of the Puranas, the rites and formula are more clearly set forth in voluminous collection of books called Tantras. These writings convey their meaning in the similitude of dialogue between Uma or Shiva and Parvati. The followers of the Tantras profess to consider them as a 5th Ved and attribute to them equal antiquity and superior authority. The Tantras are too numerous to specify them further, but the curious reader will find them under the heads of Simaya Rahasha, Anandra, Rudra, Yamala, Mandra, Mahadoni, Sareda, Tilika, and Kalika Tantras. Although any of these goddesses may be objects of the Sakta worship, and the term Sakti comprehends them all, yet the homage of the Saktas is almost restricted in Bengal to the consort of Shiva, and Varnis or Vamasharis worship Devi as well as the goddesses. Their worship is derived from a portion of the Tantras. According to the immediate object of the worshipper is the particular form of worship, but all the forms require the use of some or all of the 5 makaras: Mansa, Matsya, Madhya, Maituna, and Mudra. That is, flesh, fish, wine, women, and certain mystical gesticulations with fingers. Suitable mantras or incantations are also indispensable, according to the end proposed, consisting of various unmeaning monosyllabic combinations of letters or great imaginary efficacy. When the object of worship is to acquire an interview with or control over impure spirits, a dead body is necessary. The adept is also to be alone, at midnight, in a cemetery or a place where bodies are burnt. Seated on the corpse, he is to perform the usual offerings, and if he do so without fear or disgust, the dutas or yoginis and the other male and female demons become his slaves. In this and many of the observances practiced, solitude is enjoyed, but all the principal ceremonies comprehend the worship of Sakti or power and require for that purpose the presence of a young and beautiful girl as the living representative of the goddess. This worship is mostly celebrated in a mixed society, the men of which represent Bhairavas or Viras, and the women Banravis and Nayikas. The Sakti is personified by a naked girl, to whom meat and wine are offered, and then distributed among the assistants. Here follows the chanting of the mantras and sacred texts, and the performance of the mudra, or gesticulations with the fingers. The whole terminates with orgies amongst the votaries of a very licentious description. This ceremony is entitled the Sri Chakra, or Purnabhisheka, the ring or full initiation. This method of adoring the Sakti is unquestionably acknowledged by the texts regarded by the Vanas as authorities for the impurities practiced. The members of the sect are sworn to secrecy, and will not therefore acknowledge any participation in Sakta Puja. Some years ago, however, they began to throw off this reserve, and at the present day they trouble themselves very little to disguise their initiation into the mysteries, but they do not divulge in what those mysteries consist. The Kaushiluas are another branch of the Sakta sect. Their worship much resembles that of Kaulas. They are, however, distinguished by one particular rite not practiced by the others, and throw into confusion all of the ties of female relationship. Natural restraints are wholly disregarded, and a community of women among the votaries inculcated. On the occasions of the performance of divine worship, the women and girls deposit their julis, or bodices, in a box in charge of the guru or priest. At the close of the rites, the male worshippers take each a juli from the box, and the female to whom it belongs, even were she his sister, becomes his partner for the evening in these lavish orgies. In every temple of any importance in India, we find a troop of nautch and dancing girls attached. These women are generally procured when quite young and are early initiated into all the mysteries of their profession. They are instructed in dancing and vocal and instrumental music, their chief employment being to chant the sacred hymns and perform nautches before the god on the reoccurrence of high festivals. But this is not the only service required of them, for besides being the acknowledged mistresses of the officiating priests, it is their duty to prostitute themselves in the courts of the temple to all comers, and thus raise funds for their enrichment of the place of worship to which they belong. A nautch woman esteems it a peculiar privilege to become the Radha Dea on such occasions. It is an office, indeed, which these adepts are, on every account, better calculated to fulfill with satisfaction to the sect of Sakteyas, who require their aid, than a more innocent and unsophisticated girl. The worship of Sakti is the adoration of power, which the Hindus typify by the yoni or womb, the arga or vulva, and by the leaves and flowers of certain plants thought to resemble it. The Ananda Tantram, chapter 7, 148, and other passages, reference is made to Bhagamala. She appears to be the goddess who presides over the pudendam mulyeber, meaning the deified vulva, and the Sakti is thus personified. Such are some of the peculiar features of the worship of power, or Gnosticism, in which, combined with the Linga Puja, or adoration of the phallus, constitutes at the present day one of the most popular dogmas of the Hindus. Heckenthorn tells us that the Maharajas constitute another sect of priests, and adds, "It appears abundantly from the works of recognized authority written by Maharajas and form existing popular belief in the Vallabhacharya oh my gosh, I hope I don't have to say that too often, Vallabhacharya sect, that Vallabhacharya is believed to have been an incarnation of the god Krishna, and that the Maharajas, as descendants of Vallabhacharya, have claimed and received from their followers the like character of incarnations of that god by hereditary succession. The ceremonies of the worship paid to Krishna through these priests are all of the most licentious character. The love and subserviency due to the Supreme Being are here materialized and transferred to those who claim to be living incarnations of the god. Hence the priests exercise an unlimited influence over their female votaries, who consider it a great honor to acquire the temporary regard of the voluptuous Maharajas, the belief in whose pretensions is allowed to interfere almost vitally with the domestic relations of husband and wife. One moment, please. Sorry, I had to take a drink. Miss Mayo, in her book Mother India, published in 1927, gives an interesting description of a temple of Kali. Kali Ghat, place of Kali, is the root word of the name Calcutta. Kali is the Hindu goddess, wife of the great god Shiva, whose attribute is destruction and whose thirst is for blood and death sacrifice. Kali has thousands of temples in India, great and small. Hackenthorne further explains that the association of thugs, after having existed in India for centuries, was only discovered in 1810. The names by which the members were known to each other and also to others was Fansiger, that is, men of the noose. The name thug is said to be derived from thaga, to deceive, because the thugs get hold of their victims by luring them into false security. One common mode of decoying young men, having valuables upon them, is to place a young and handsome woman by the wayside, and apparently in great grief, who by some pretended tale of misfortune draws him into the jungle, where the gang are lying in ambush, and on the appearance strangle him. The gang consists of from 10 to 50 members, and they will follow or accompany the marked out victim for days, nor attempt his murder until an opportunity offering every chance of success presents itself. After every murder they perform a religious ceremony called Jagmi, and the division of the spoil is regulated by old established laws. The man that threw the handkerchief gets the largest share, the man that held the hands to the next largest proportion, and so on. In some gangs, their property is held in common. Their crimes are committed in honor of Kali, who hates our race, and to whom the death of man is a pleasing sacrifice. Kali, or Bhavani, for she is equally known by both names, was, according to the Indian legend, born of the burning eye which Shiva has on his forehead, whence she issued, like the Greek Minerva, out of the skull of Jupiter, a perfect and full-grown being. She represents the evil spirit, delights in human blood, presides over plague and pestilence, and directs the storm and hurricane, and ever aims at destruction. She is represented under the most frightful effigy the Indian mind could conceive. Her face is azure, streaked with yellow. Her glance is ferocious. She wears her disheveled and bristly hair displayed like a peacock's tail, and braided with green serpents. Her purple lips seem streaming with blood. Her tusk-like teeth descend over her lower lip. She has 8 or 10 arms, each hand holding some murderous weapon, and sometimes a human head dripping with gore. With one foot she stands on a human corpse. She has her temples, in which the people sacrifice cocks and bullocks to her. But her priests are the thugs, the sons of death, who quench the never-ending thirst of this divine vampire. As regards the sect of Kali's worshippers, Heckathorn gives the following details. A newly admitted member takes the appellation of Sahib Sada. He commences his infamous career as Luga, or grave digger, or as Bilal, or explorer of spots most convenient for executing a projected assassination, or bill. In this condition he remains for several years, until he has given abundant proof of his ability and goodwill. He is then raised to the degree of Bhuttata, or strangler, which advancement, however, is preceded by the new formalities and ceremonies on the day appointed for the ceremony. The candidate is conducted by his guru into a circle formed in the sand surrounded by mysterious hieroglyphics, where prayers are offered up to their deity. The ceremony lasts 4 days, during which the candidate is allowed no other food but milk. He occupies himself in practicing the immolation of victims fastened to a cross erected on the ground. On the 5th day, the priest gives him the fatal noose, washed in holy water and anointed with oil, and after more religious ceremonies, he is pronounced a perfect Buddhata. He binds himself by fearful oaths to maintain the most perfect silence on all that concerns the society, and to labor without ceasing towards the destruction of the human race. He is the Rex Sacrificialis, and the person he encounters and Bhawani places in his way, the victim. Certain persons, however, are accepted from the attacks of the thugs. The political significance of such a sect in any theocracy can be easily understood when one realizes what it means to the rulers of the land to have their disposal of staff fanatics trained to kill anyone on the order of a priest. The utility of such organizations is obvious in a hierarchy where the rulers are also priests reigning by divine right. Okay, looks like we got chapter 3 under the belt. I don't know how long I've been streaming, about a little under an hour. Okay, I'm going to take a swig of water and then I'm going to read chapter 4. I read as far as I can go. Chapter 4, Mazdeism, Zoroastrianism. While the origin of Mazdeism seems shrouded in mystery, one may nevertheless recognize its antiquity, probably the same as that of Rig Veda, for it has been proved by Eugene Burnoff and Spiegel that certain parts of the Avesta are as old as the Rig. I have to turn on my cooler again. And the many similarities of this religion with that of Vedas proves that Mazdeism must have had its origin at the time when Aryans undertook the conquest of India. That is to say, 17 to 18 centuries before our era. From Le Mazdeim, l'Avesta of de la Font, we extract the following facts. The historic role of Media began with Owakshatara, a name written by the Greeks, Cusaris, the founder of the Median Empire. After defeating the Scythians, Cusaris went to Assyria, where he laid siege to Nineveh, after the destruction of which the Assyrian Empire came to an end. That was around 612 BC. Cusaris, I'm probably saying that totally wrong. Cusaris left a son, Astyages, whose daughter, Mandane, married the Persian Cambyses, and from their union sprang the great Cyrus, founder of the Persian Empire. The Parthian dynasty of the Arsacides, who reigned from 256 BC until 226 AD, marks a fatal period for Mazdeism. It was only on the accession of Ardashir Babajan, the founder of the Sassanid dynasty, that Mazdeism regained its strength. With Ardashir, Mazdeism became the state religion, and Shapur II caused all the Avesta texts treating of philosophy, medicine, cosmogony, and astronomy to be collected. Under the last Sassanids appeared several heretical sects. the most celebrated of which were those of Mainz and of Mazdeik. However, in the 7th century came the Arab conquest. With Yezdegerd, the Persian Empire of the Sassanids disappeared, and with it the influence of Mazdeism. Towards the 10th century, a few thousand Persians, faithful to the old cult, went into exile, taking with them their laws and altars. Some of these took refuge in the Kirman, in the Yezd, while the others fled to India, where they now constitute a well-known sect of the Parsis. The Zend Avesta, the sacred book of Persia and of modern Parsis, contains the teaching of Zoroaster, Zarathustra, a reformer said to have lived some 7,000 years before Christ. It was first translated into French by Hyacinthe Anquetil du Perron in 1761. The Chevalier de Ramsay, giving Plutarch as his authority, says, Zoroaster taught that there are two gods contrary to each other in their operations, the one the author of all the good, the other of all evil in nature. The good principle he calls Oro Mazes, Ahura Mazda. The other, the demon The demon is called Agramanius. He says that the one resembles light and truth, the other darkness and ignorance. There is likewise a middle god between these two, named Mithras, whom the Persians call the intercessor or mediator. Mithras is the Yazata spirit of light and the guardian of justice and truth. For the benefit of the reader, we compile the following interesting information from the previously mentioned author, de la Font. Pure Zoroastrianism was the monotheistic, for in the beginning Ahura Mazda was recognized as infinitely more powerful than Agramanius. Thus, dualism, or the potential equality of these two deities, was actually the development of the later corruption of the Zoroastrian teaching. The Avesta, the Bible of Mazdeism, containing the revelations of Ahura Mazda to the prophet Zoroaster, is composed of two principal parts: the Avesta, containing the Vendidad, the Yagna, and the Visperd, and the Karda Avesta, or Little Avesta, itself composed of 6 parts. Mazdeism taught the immortality of the soul, a compensating justice in another world of heaven or hell, the resurrection of the body, the last judgment, and the freedom of the soul to choose between right and wrong as a free agent, as opposed to the Islamic theory of fatalism. Oramazes, as the universal creator of all that is good, eternal, he created the good Geni, the spiritual and material world. Man is his creature, and at the end of time he will resurrect him to endow him with eternal happiness, and will cause the powers of evil and evil itself to vanish from the earth. No cult is rendered to Agramanius, Lucifer, who, with his devas, evil spirits, fights Ahura Mazda, which is God, through the ages. Fire, in the Mazdean religion, was worshipped as the luminous and pure element, the work of Ahura Mazda, and for that reason always burns sheltered from defilement. But it is not material fire that in this case is to be considered as a yazata. The Avesta distinguishes several kinds of fire. Okay. If anybody knows how to pronounce these things and listens to this, you're gonna, you might as well take a break and cringe. Cringe break. Beretsu Kavanha, or internal fire of the earth. Vuhu Freyana, or fire of the human body and animals, which is Kundalini, sex force, and serpent power. Urvasista, or fire of vegetation. Vasista, or fire of lightning. Penista, or fire of Ahura Mazda, represented by the fire on the altar. The Fravashis, modern pharaohs, are supposed to be souls of the dead deified. Their cult also forms the basis of the ancestor worship of the Pitris of India and the Manes of the Latin countries. According to Geiger, by Fravashis, must be understood the immortal divine part in man, which unites with a body for a limited time only. Consequently, there are fravashes of those who are dead and those who are living, and of those who are still unborn. Darmstadt further explains that the fravashes are a spiritual form of being, independent of its material life and anterior to it. According to Mazdean teaching, Oromazes offered to the furores of men the choice of remaining in the spiritual world or of descending on earth to incarnate in human bodies. Excuse me. I need to turn the page here. At the advent of death, corpses were supposed immediately to become. Let me take a second break. Thank you for following, Gambler. I have a problem. My alerts aren't working, so I can't see it while I'm reading. I'm gonna have to fix that when the stream is over. But it's good to see ya. I'll go on. At the advent of death, corpses were supposed immediately to become the prey of the demon Drugnekas, the demon of the impurity of corpses, thus it being most essential never to allow the elements of fire, water, and earth to be sullied by contact with anything unclean. The funeral rites and ceremonies of the Mazdeans differ from those of other religions. Their ancient customs persist today among the Parsis of India, where the bodies of the dead are carried to the towers of silence, there to be exposed and devoured by the birds of prey. Besides the many other parallels between Mazdeism and Christianity, the deity of the Mazdeans, their personal god Ahura Mazda, was not a god of vengeance, as was the Jehovah of the Jews. He was the essence of universal love, charity, justice, and activity, and the ideal Mazdean virtue in early times was similar to that of the Christians of today. Okay, take a short break and a swig. Jainism. Jainism, which like Buddhism denies the authority of the Vedas and is therefore regarded by the Brahmins of India as heretical, may have been founded by Parsva, whose death is placed at 250 years before that of Vardhama Mahavira, the last of the prophets of the Jains and a contemporary of Buddha. Vardhamana Mahavira died at the age of 72 at Pava, 527 BC. He had 11 disciples to whom he preached the law. Many authorities, however, believe the Jain church to be as old as the Brahmanism itself. The following paragraph, quoted from Hastings' Encyclopedia of Religions and Ethics, article on Jainism, describes the Jain theory of the transmigration of souls as opposed to the orthodox theory of reincarnation. It is here referred to as a peculiarity of the Jains, which had struck all observers more than any other. Their extreme carefulness not to destroy any living being, a principle which is carried out to its very last consequences in monastic life and has shaped the conduct of the laity in a great measure. No layman will intentionally kill any living being, not even an insect, however troublesome. He will remove it carefully without hurting it. It goes without saying that the Jains are strict vegetarians. This principle of not hurting any living being bars them from some professions, such as agriculture, and has thrust them into commerce and especially into its least elevating branch of money lending. Most of the money lending in Western India is in the hands of the Jains, and this accounts in a great measure both for their unpopularity and for their wealth. A remarkable institution of the Jains, due to their tender regard for animal life, is their asylums for old and diseased animals, the Panjara Polas, where they are kept and fed till they die a natural death. The reluctance on the part of the orthodox Jain to discourage vermin on the theory that a louse may actually be his reincarnated grandmother, or a scorpion, some other reincarnated relative, is only a logical development of his religious belief in the transmigration of souls. The Jains are subdivided today into numerous schools, each following the teachings of a certain master, but united in certain fundamental beliefs. So, we read chapter 3 and 4, and I think I'm going to call it a day and start off chapter 5 next time, where it covers Confucianism and Taoism. So I hope you enjoy this reading, and I'm going to close it down now.